up in church, and I don't say this. It's backward. My OCD's not going to let it stay that way. Growing up in church, sometimes we get programmed to do things a certain way, and whenever something changes, you almost freak out, like, oh, you know, just like if you have a place that you normally sit, and if somebody's in there, gets there before you and sits in your spot, it's almost like, oh my God, what I'm going to do now? I can't clap on beat because I'm not on my same side. And, so today when this word kind of came to my spirit, I'm like, I can't preach this in tennis shoes. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's just ridiculous. It's no secret that a lot of times when I preach, it's what I would call cotton candy, because I try to give the to encourage you and to celebrate God. It's not that I don't believe that in the judgment of God and the sin of God, but one thing the Lord impressed upon my heart today, God don't judge people really here on this earth. When people go through things, he judges nations, but it says it's once a man to die, then the judgment. So for the most part, people are not going to be judged here on earth. They're going to be judged in heaven for what they do on earth. But God sends judgments to nations. He sends judgments to, he would the enemies of God would be judged. But go back and ask you to search it. There's not a whole lot of, he might people, if the Lord chooses, if he needs. But as generically, God lets us live our life. And then after our life is lived, he will judge us. That's what it says, right? It's appointed a man once to die, then come the judgment. The judgment will be when our life is done. God gives us the years to be able to do the things that he wants us to do, and then he judges us. And I believe in the judgment of God, and I believe in trying to provoke people and challenge people to do better. We grew up in a church where it was a lot of hellfire and brimstone and a lot of those things, and I didn't see a whole lot of change happening there. It was just a lot of screaming and a lot of amening from the same 4 or 5 people. So I do preach happy messages. I do preach encouraging messages on purpose. But sometimes God puts something on your heart that is a little heavier, because there's times where the Lord wants to shake us, wake us, encourage us, and to do better things, and to change. I got a rhetorical question to start this, today. And if you don't know what a rhetorical question is, it's a question that don't require comment. So I'm asking a question, not expecting a response, because quite frankly, this response would be, it's kind of a weird question for a church. So the rhetorical question that I'm asking today is, are you afraid of heights? Can we put that slide up? Are you afraid of heights? See, that's why I didn't want you to respond, because you don't know how to respond. Praise Church is speechless. Take note of this. Somebody take note. This church knows more about everything in the fastest amount of time than anybody if I ever would. I get back home from the store and somebody knows I was at Robbie's. Maybe because they saw the van. I don't know. So how many here are you afraid of heights? I want to ask you that. If you know me, you know that one of the things that I'm afraid of is heights. And I'm not even afraid of heights. I'm afraid of falling. First time we went on an airplane, I was probably 21. Well, whatever. 2001, we decided we're going to go to Washington, D.C. We were going to go to Washington, D.C., and so we were going to drive there, but they had was it Priceline? Priceline maybe it was, or Expedia. One of them, you would name your price. You used to say, I want to go for this price, and it would see. So I said, I'm going to go to fly round trip for $150. But I never expected to get a ticket for $150 a person, round trip from New Orleans to D.C. Lo and behold, we got it. So I, the person scared of heights, had to get on a plane. So the whole time I was worried. Then we get there, and because we had such first-class seats, we were all the way in the back, right next to the engines, because it was one of those little planes with the engines on the back, not on the wing, because it was $150. And when the engine started, it began to shake, and I was like, God, we're going to die. I'm going to die now. And then when it took off and it pushed me back to the seat, I'm like, I'm dead. I'm dead, trying to realize if I hadn't repented of something, because I just knew I was going to die. And I thought for sure this was going to be, pretty bad, because I'm thinking, I just don't want to die. My mom and dad was on the plane, and my ex-wife, who were dating at the time, and I'm like, I don't want to die here. But we made it, and we made it back. But I want to ask you, are you afraid of heights? Everybody knows the story, and it'll be my last height story, is how many heard the story when I was we were on the Empire State Building. And I'm not scared of heights if I'm in glass, because it doesn't matter. It's pretty cool. World Trade number 1, the new World Trade Center, it's pretty high. And look, I can look at the glass, and I can take down and pictures, but I got glass there. I know unless the building's falling over, I'm good. But we went to the Empire State Building the first time we went to New York City, and because we had to go. And man, I went up there, and I was so scared. I remember I'm gonna look at all 4 corners, so I go north, south, east, and west. And then I'm going inside, and that's all I need to see of New York City. I took a picture on each side. I have it somewhere. And so I went to the first side, which I looked uptown, I looked downtown, I looked east and west. And when I was getting ready, I was at the corner because, I'm trying to be a man, and I'm thinking, forget this, you got mail stuff. No, Sleepless in Seattle. Sleepless in Seattle, I wouldn't have been up there looking for I'd have been up there, we can meet on the ground. If you want to meet, I'll be at the door. And I remember I looked over, and I'm holding on, and this pigeon came, whoo, and I was like, whoa. I almost knocked that pigeon out. I became Rocky Balboa. I thought I was in Philly for a second. Maybe I'd have dropped him like the Godfather. Bam. I'm going to take you to the mattresses. And so then I said, this is enough. This is ridiculous. So I went, and I was against the wall. Y'all probably heard the story. And I'm scared to death. And I look over, and right next to me is a little short, like 80-year-old white-haired lady. And she's just as scared as me. And I did this, and she did this, and I followed her inside. Because I'm scared of heights. But I want to know if you're scared of heights today, and there's a reason why. And the Lord placed this in my heart. If you have your Bibles or your phones, or if not, it'll come up on the screen. I want to turn to Isaiah 55, and we'll start with verse 1. Somebody say Isaiah 55, verse 1. It says this, "O everyone that is thirsty, come ye to the waters." Now, I'm reading ahead because I like to put things in, say it with me, context. Context. So the first verse, what is he saying? If you're lacking, if you're thirsty, if you're missing something, come. So that's what starts out the whole chapter. It says, "Oh, everyone that is thirsty." When you're thirsty, you are missing water. Water is essential for life. And he says, if you're needing water, come. If you're thirsty, come to the waters. He that has no money, come ye, buy and eat. Yea, come buy wine and milk without money, without price. So he starts saying, hey, if you're lacking, come to the source. And if you don't have money, you can still buy it. You can still receive it. Verse 2, please. He says, "Wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread, or your labor for which satisfies not. Hearken diligently unto me, and eat ye that which is good, and let your soul delight itself in fatness. So he's saying, if you're lacking something, I have something for you. And listen to this. Verse 3, it says, incline your ear. Come unto me. I'm going to ask the question again, are you afraid of heights? So he says, if you're missing something, come. And you'll be fat. But he says, I want you to hear. Incline. Turn your ear. Come unto me. Hear. And your soul shall live. So he's saying, you're missing something. I have it. And I'll make your soul fat. You will be filled to more than enough. But listen. Are we listening tonight? My question I'll ask again, are you afraid of heights? He says, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even sure the mercies of David. Behold, I have given him for a witness to the people, a leader and a commander to the people, referring to David. Now 5, behold, I shall call a nation that thou knowest not, and the nations that knew not thee shall run unto you because of the Lord your God, for the Holy One of Israel, for he had glorified you. Verse number 6 I think is important to the time that we live in. It says, seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call ye upon him while he is near. I'm almost there. I want to ask the question again, are you afraid of heights? For let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return unto the Lord, and he will have mercy upon him. And to our God, he will abundantly pardon, for he will abundantly pardon. 8 and 9 is where I wanted to stay at. And this is God speaking through the prophet. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither your ways my ways. Read that again with me. For my thoughts, they're not your thoughts, and neither my ways are not your ways. The hardest thing to discern the voice of God is to try to figure out that it's God speaking and not me talking. It's not my way. It's not my emotions. It's not my thoughts speaking. So how do you discern this? You have to be sensitive to the Spirit, because the problem so many times today is that people think it's actually God and it's not. You got people saying, God said, God said, God said, when God's probably up there saying, I ain't spoken to them in years. Because they didn't do with what they said in number 3. Incline your ear. The first thing they hear God's voice is to listen. Are we listening? He says, incline your ears, stay there, but I'll read it again. Incline your ears, come unto me, hear, and your soul shall live. Without the hearing, without the listening, and without the coming, our souls won't live. But did you ever realize he says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts. The way you think is not the way I'm going to think. So what he's saying is carnal man's, their thoughts are opposite of God. I still got you confused. You still have no idea how that fits into, are you afraid of heights? He said, for my thoughts, they're not your thoughts. And your ways are not my ways. See, a lot of times we want to do it God's way, don't want to do it God's way because we want God to do it our way. And I've been saying this a lot. And if you don't watch it in my life, I've learned that I've tried over the years to manipulate God. God, I need you to do this. And what I'll do, I'll go on a hunger strike, which I call a fast, but I'm really not going to eat until you do what I need. It's quiet. You know what a fast is? At its core, it's killing your flesh. It has nothing to do with get God moving. It has nothing to do to get God to heal someone, to do something in the church. But at its core, it's saying that Chad's flesh is too much alive. It's in control. And I want to kill this thing because I want my spirit to be alive. And I try to manipulate God. God, if you do this, I'm going to do more. I'll pray more. I'll read more. I'll do all these things. But you know what? Let's not manipulate God. Let's surrender. Because he don't do it our way anyway. Because his thoughts are not like our thoughts. And his ways are not like our ways. So I want to ask you another time, are you afraid of heights? Verse 9 says, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways. And my thoughts are then your thoughts. Well, he could have said, my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. So I want to tell you that I really think the church in general is afraid of heights. We're afraid of coming up from our fleshly thoughts into the way that God thinks. In believing those things are higher. He says, hey, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Look, I'm so much higher than you are. But he says in verse 3, listen and come. That's a call for us to come up higher. Sometimes we settle for right here, and God's trying you to come up. We settle for the valley when God's saying, come up on the mountaintops. He says the heaven is higher than the earth. So heavenly things will be higher than earthly things. He says, and my ways are so much higher than your ways. And my thoughts, he says, hey, they're higher than your thoughts. Somebody say, I need to have some higher learning. Ephesians 4, 1 and 6. Listen to this. Paul says this. That was Old Testament. Listen to what Paul says. Therefore, the prisoner of the Lord beseech you that you walk worthy of the vocation wherewith you've called. The vocation, we all know that it's a job. It's the calling, the job that God has for you with lowliness and meekness and long suffering and forbearing one another in love. Endearing to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. And that's something the church can never have enough of, is love and unity in the bond of peace. Endeavoring to keep the unity. This is just going to be lanyap, but when you want to keep the peace, come on, husbands and wives, when you want to keep the peace, sometimes you just don't say what you're thinking. Sometimes you don't say what you feel because I'm just trying to keep the peace. Sometimes at work you want to tell a coworker something, but you don't. So sometimes we should watch our words because because I love you, I'm not going to hurt you, and endeavor, labor, try to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. That was Lanyap. Keep reading. There is one body, one Spirit, even as you are called in one hope of your calling. There's one Lord, there's one faith, there's one baptism, one God and Father of one God and Father of all, who is above all, through all, and in you all. Somebody say, God is higher. God is higher. If we can go to Isaiah 66, Isaiah 66, verse 1, it says, thus saith the Lord, the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where the house is that you have built upon me. Where is it? Where is the house that you built upon me? And where is the place of my rest? I'm trying to make a point that God is so much higher. And sometimes I think I'm so close. Man, I've been praying. I've been reading, and oh, my faith is strong. And then God lets a circumstance fall upon me. And in adversity, it knows how far our strength and our faith is. When troubles come, that lets me see how my faith is testing in the trying of our faith. But I want to kind of sum it up together with this. Listen. Revelations 4, 1 and 2. And this is where the Lord spoke to me today. He says, after this, John speaking, after this I looked, and behold, a door was open in heaven. A door was open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was it as a trumpet talking unto me. This voice sounded like a trumpet, which said, come up hither, and I will show you things which must be hereafter. Stop there. In John 10 and 7, leave that on. Just leave Revelations, please. Jesus says, I am the door. And any man that comes unto me. So today as I'm reading it, and I had this idea about, are we scared to go into the presence of God? Are we scared to go up higher? And he's trying to reach us up higher. And when I begin to read Revelation, the Lord spoke to my spirit, and he says, that is what I'm crying to the church. He says, hey, you got to hear. He said in Isaiah 55:3, incline your ear, hear. And what do you hear? The Spirit in these days now, in this time, it's saying, come up hither. I need you to come higher. I want you to rise above the mundane life you've been living. And there's a place in God where I'm trying to call you. And the Lord spoke and said, come up hither, and I will show you the things that must be. We complain of what's befalling on the earth, but these things must be, church. Are we afraid of heights? Are we afraid of where God wants to bring us? Why? Heights are so scary. See, I wasn't made to live in the atmosphere. Because I dwell on the earth, on the surface. We are called a surface dweller. So when I go in the air, I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm out of my element. I'm not in control anymore. Because when I got on that plane, there was the man in the blue suit with the lines on his shoulder. He had full control. I was just along for the ride. And I started thinking, God, when I come up hither, when I come up, and you show me things, I'm not in control anymore. He's showing me. Now, some people think this is the rapture. I disagree. I don't think this is the rapture, because he's specifically telling John. Every somebody, I just disagree with that theology. He says, come up. I need to show you some things that's going to happen. This ain't the catching away. And I believe God is saying in these days, it's time for you to come up. Praise church, you've been living good all these time, but there's so much more. We settle for just a little bit of God. But he's saying, I got to show you deeper things. There's more things. When we leave out the place that we used to, guess what? That's now I got to depend on someone to bring me substance. I can't do anything for myself. I can't walk. I can't swim. If they let me go, I will fall. Heights are a scary place. But I believe God is speaking to us today, and he's saying, come up higher. I'm calling you higher. I need to show you some things. that's coming. And he says, hey, I want you to begin to come up higher. Come up higher. Come up higher. See, when we come up high, we leave the only place we've ever known. There's plenty times, men of God, he had to take Moses out of Egypt to bring him to an unknown place. He had to take Abraham out of Ur. He says, hey, I need to show you this place. He says, I don't know where I'm going, but I'll know when I get there. I'm telling you, I don't know exactly where God's taking us, but I know when I'm going to get there. What would happen, and I'm closing, to a church that begins to step up higher? In your personal walk with God, if you begin to say, God, start revealing these revelations to me. What would happen if you would hear God's voice and say, come up higher? And look, it might not be for the whole body. It might be for you. He's wanting to show you things and bring you into a greater place and a greater walk with God. Why come up higher? He wants you to come up. I read a story about a girl. She was writing about her ride in a helicopter, and she was scared too. But she said she was one of the islands somewhere. I think it was I don't know, it wasn't the Virgin Islands. It was somewhere, St. Lucia it was. And she says she didn't want to go in the chopper because it was loud. And she said it's nothing like an airplane. But she said the view from up there was totally different. I went in one of the fairs. We went in a helicopter ride over Lafayette. And it was kind of at night. And you know, it was a different view before. Because up higher, everything got quiet. The voices were drowned out. Up higher, I didn't see only just a mile in front of me, but I could see miles out. I could see what was coming. I could see so much clearly the way everything was working together. See, when we're on the ground, I can only see what's right in front of me. But if I can just get to a place that is elevated, that a place is higher. I don't know why I'm going through this storm. Oh, but if I could just come up higher, if I can just come up, just come up, and I'll be able to see the view from the top is a different view. And that's what he's saying. Hey, come up, church. There's some things I got to show you. And maybe if we would come up, this recession and the things that are coming on the earth wouldn't be as scary because they're starting to make sense because we're looking the way God sees things. Did you ever wonder why he wasn't killed on the ground? He was killed on a cross, suspended. He had a different view. And I'll end it with this. What would happen if the church would come up higher? Come up higher. See, we call it the army of God, right? And as a military, what is the one thing you strive for first when you try to conquer a country? When we went into Afghanistan, Iraq, and the Gulf War, World War II, there's one thing that you try to establish more than anything else. It's great to get the ports. It's great. It's great to have men on the ground, but there's one thing that the generals strive for. There's one thing, and I said, God, when he's put this on my heart, I said, give this to Praise Church. And that's air superiority. The one thing they want first is air superiority. They want to control the air. They want to have their planes where they see everything. With church, with the Lord saying, come up higher. What would happen with just a few handful of Christians saying, I'm coming up? Oh, you wonder what the revivals of the 30s and the 40s, when we had our grandmas and grandmothers and grandfathers with their feeble knees, but when they would get on their knees, they would touch heaven. Oh, because I believe they had air superiority. It looked to the world as they were coming down, but heaven saw them coming up higher. When you hit your knees, guess what? You're coming up higher. Coming up higher. So I believe God is speaking to us. And the question is, he's asking, are you afraid of heights? Are you ready to come up higher? Are you ready to come up higher? Choice is ours. I wish we could all get together, but there's going to be some people that say, hey, I'm good here. And some people say that we're going to come across with life. No, I'm going back down, because not everybody that says, Lord, Lord, is going to make it in. But I believe God is calling. He's calling us. I want more. I want more. I want more. And this is to start out, church. I got one more message Sunday. We're going to talk about, don't believe me, just watch the last one. And then we're going to start in believing bigger. It's going to take us coming up higher to start believing bigger. We settle for so many things in life when we just need to start believing bigger, believing God. But guess what? When you go up, it's funny how when things are, when I went to Mount Rushmore, guess what? It looks pretty big from the ground. But when you see it from the air, it's not as big. When we flew into D.C., guess what? I saw the Capitol and the Washington Monument. It looked like a little toothpick. But when I got there, it was bigger. See, if you can only change that view, if you can only change that view, your trials wouldn't seem so big, because we're looking from the other side. We sung that song Sunday morning, I'm looking up. I'm looking up. And there's a part in there that says, all my problems are below you. All our problems are below you. So I want to challenge you. Whatever's happening, start looking up. Come up higher. Come up higher. Well, you might have been saved 2 days. Well, it's time to come up higher. You might have been saved 2 years. It's time to come up higher. You might have been saved 20 years. It's time to come up higher. I don't care if you've been saved 50 years. Come up higher, church. Come up higher. I believe God's saying there's so much more I want to do. If there is a people which are called by my name, will just come up. Amen. Amen. I don't know about you, but do you hear this? Do you hear in the Spirit God saying, I want you to come. I want you to come. I want you to come. Church, there's only one thing that'll leave you, that'll stop you from hearing the voice of God. One thing, and I'm closing. One thing. The Bible says the voice of God came down, and Adam wasn't there. And he began to cry out, Adam, Adam, where art thou? And Adam said, I ain't coming because I've sinned. I ain't coming because I've done wrong. But it's funny how I want to encourage you this. I don't want to leave it negative. It's funny how God knew he had already sinned, but he met him and called him anyway. What if Adam would have came and repented instead of hid? So I encourage you, if you hear the voice of God, no matter what you're going through, run. Say, Lord, throw yourself at his feet. Throw himself. Guess what? He will forgive you, and he wants to bring us. But if you can put Isaiah 55:3 again, and we'll end with this. It says, incline your ear. He's saying, you listen. Listen. Hear me. There's so many times in life where when I prayed, when I got on my knees to pray, I had my ears plugged because I didn't want to hear what God was saying. I don't want to hear it, but I'm here. But he says, incline your ear, turn your ear, lean your ear, hear, and your soul shall live. I will say this, and I'm closing for the 42nd time. There's so much times in my life where I might be serving God, but can I be real? I felt dead. I don't feel God, don't feel his spirit, making my own decisions. Still come to church, still sing, still preach. But something inside was dead, it was missing. And then when I read this today, he says, your soul shall live. My body's breathing. I'm still moving. But my spirit was dry. My spirit was on life support. So today, sitting down, I said, yes, Lord. I want to hear, and I'm coming up higher. I'm coming up higher. And that's going to mean changing my habits. But I want to come up higher. Most of y'all heard this story, but when I was traveling, God, you don't got a song to shut me up with or something? Because I'm just going to keep on if I don't hear some music. God would wake me up 3 o'clock almost every night. Man, I'd go in that trailer we lived in, and I would go to that back, and I had a big old desk set up with paper, and it was easy shots. I could be halfway sleeping in a trailer this way and that way. You know what I'm saying? If you go this way, you don't go too much. So it was easy, half sleeping, If you're in a big house, you might have worried about falling down the steps or something like that. But in a trailer, I would just walk there, and I was half sleeping, but I knew God had called me, and he would begin to show me things. He was bringing me higher. Man, I had books of notes, and all these messages would just flow. And man, before Shirley would even get up, I had done cried. I had done laid on the floor. I had done rejoice. I had done dance like a gypsy and cried again. And all these things he would show, and I'd go back to bed at around 6 or so. And then we were in Tennessee, and we were at a camp meeting, and he woke me up at 3 o'clock. And I'm in a hotel room, so I walked down. And I went to the meeting room where we were having service. And I began to pray, and I began to pray, and I began to pray. But see, I was tired. And I remember saying, God, why am I here? And then I'll just say what I said. And I said, when all the fat and sassy Christians are still sleeping. And I said, I'm going to bed. And I went back to bed. And that's probably been 7 years, and he never woke me up again. Never. And as much as I pray and beg, but see, God taught me a lesson. He said, Chad, I was calling you. I was showing you things. And he wasn't showing me all at once, but the more as the weeks and the month and that year, begin to develop, he was getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And it was for about a year and a half, he would wake me up. And I made a promise that God, when you call, if I got to roll, if I got to crawl, if I got to scratch my way half sleeping, when you call, I'm coming. When you call, I'm coming, because I'm desperate for a move of God. Having a church kind of full is good, but without the power of God, what a woe we. Calling myself a Christian is good, but without miracles, signs and wonders, what are we? So today, when I was sitting in my chair and I heard God say, come up hither. Come up higher. As my eyes watered, I said, yes, Lord. But I'm afraid of heights. See, I don't know where I'm going. I'm not in control anymore. So I want to ask you, what are you going to do? If God calls you, if you hear your ears saying, come up higher, come up higher. I like the way he didn't say, I'm taking you higher. He says, you come. You come. You come. And as I was getting ready to close my, close my computer, my mind went back to Moses and how he was minding his business. And he saw the bush. And then out of the bush, he began to call his name. And I started thinking, he said it was on the hillside. He had to go up. He had to come up higher to get to God. See, God will come down to us. He already sent his son down, and he'll go down to the sinner. But guess what? When you become a child, you have to come up to him. He'll come down to the sinner, but now it's time to us to come up higher. And he told Moses, he says, take off your shoes. This is holy ground. And it's funny how God didn't call everybody. But he called a man that heard his voice.